Everyone on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you may be, we're broadcasting on all channels. So I want to begin by this special program called Heartwarming Chassidic Stories and Melodies. It's dedicated by Judy Kirk in honor of the birthday of Yafa Rezel Bas Tova, Davida Bat Sheva Bas Yehudit Perel, Yisrael Nissen Ben Yamin Ben Yehudit Perel, and in memory of Beinish Getzel Ben David Eliyahu, Kalman Mordechai Ben David Eliyahu Ben Avram Yitzchak, by the Kirk family. Got it right?
Right, thank you.
Okay. And you said it's your mother's yahrzeit tonight? What's her name?
Your mother's
Elkabat? Okay. Good, so we'll do it in that honor as well, with your permission. So, this discussion, I can't call it a discussion. I'm going to be doing some stories and melodies. You're going to hear me singing and telling some stories. It's coming as it's a special request of many people who have asked me to do this. So from time to time I do it sporadically, a song here, a story there. So I decided, to give a taste of it. So it's going to be a little different than what you're usually expecting. And I hope you enjoy it. But I specifically use the word heartwarming because I have to give a little introduction. Like anything needs an introduction. Even a story and a song needs an introduction. So one of the Rebbe said once, a great statement, he said, when you're asked a question, you don't have an answer, you tell a story. And if that is not sufficient, you sing a song. There's something indescribable about a story that just is not really captured in words. You hear a story, there's a certain drama, personal passion, personal touch that resonates differently than just an article or a speech. I remember when I wrote Toward a Meaningful Life, so my agent told me I should sit with Liz Purley, was then the editor-in-chief, the publisher at William Morrow. And he said she's a #1 expert on spiritual books in America. And 15 minutes with her is like 15 years of experience. We ended up spending around 2.5 hours. So how many years of experience would that be? You do the math. Okay. And one of the things she told me, which I never forgot, she said, you should add more stories. And I said, why? So she told me when people read a book, even if they're great readers, and they love books, voracious readers, but it's like a good swimmer. When a good swimmer swims in new waters, they're always looking for signposts to make sure that they're in the right place, even if they're very confident. When you read a book, ideas are ideas, but the stories are like the little anchors, the connectors. When people see a story, they feel they can trust it. So the more stories you have, the more people will continue to swim until the next story. And interestingly, so I did that. I added more stories. Interesting, after the book was published, a lot of people told me, I love the text you added to connect the story to story. When in truth, I started with the text and then added the stories. So I realized that a story has that element because it's like it could have happened to me, or identify with that person in the story, even if it didn't happen exactly to you. But it's a human condition that's being conveyed. So that's where the power of a story comes in. Now, a song, of course, goes even beyond that because a song is not even the regular conventional language. A song has melody to it, has rhythm to it, and it touches us in a very primal place. Today's studies show that even children in their mother's wombs, in the fetuses, will respond to music. They'll react to it. They will move to it. And newborns definitely. Now, how do they know that? It's because song, as I've discussed many times, is the language of the soul. And that's why it resonates in a way that stories don't even resonate, and definitely not words. So, in the tradition I grew up in, which you can say is a mystical Chassidic tradition, it's one of the best kept secrets. One of the powerful tools is not just great ideas and great philosophies and ideologies and profound psychology, but also that it all comes in hand with the human condition. Jews have always been storytellers. From the Bible, they tell the story. It's a story. It's not just the Torah is not just laws and not just facts. It's story. It's all in story form. Abraham, the story of Isaac, Jacob, Adam and Eve in the garden, story of Exodus, positive stuff, negative stuff, and with the whole drama of a story, which is never a perfect story. It always has all kinds of caveats and challenges and so on. And at the same time, also Judaism is rich with song and music. Not just chazanas, cantorials, but song is part of the tradition. Songs were composed in the temple by the Levites. You could not even climb 15, it says the 15 Shir HaMailos, 15 songs of the ascents, songs of the steps. To climb the step, you had to sing a song. So song was part of, when you read the Torah, there's a sing song, the Taimei Torah, when you read the Torah. Different occasions we sing songs, Shabbat, holidays, there's Sephardic songs, there's Ashkenazic songs. So music, melodies, and stories were not just addendums, but they were part and parcel of the entire Jewish experience that allowed us to not only survive the difficult times, but also to celebrate the good ones. And so therefore we have sad songs and we have happy songs. We even have the Lamentations, when Friday, on the night of Tisha B'Av, the saddest night of the year, was also a sing song. But it's a sad song, melancholy. Then, of course, there's the song of Purim, Megillah. So not much has been written about this, and very little is really appreciated, that it's more than just a tradition of ideas and teachings, but it's also a full-bodied experience that comes together with the stories that mothers told their children, that fathers told their children, that grandmothers and grandfathers shared with. As a matter of fact, the entire Passover is based on a story, Haggadah. We say the Haggadah of Passover. What's Haggadah mean? It comes from the word Magid, to tell the story. V'gada tolevincha, you shall tell your children the story. So it's very much a integral component in the whole experience. And therefore, I just wanted to give that introduction to appreciate it all. So I'm going to focus now. I'm going to share a bunch of stories, and some of my favorites, and I'll couple it with a song as well. So speaking that I grew up in the Chabad Chassidic tradition, which goes back 7 generations, from the Rebbe that was my mentor, Rabbi Schneerson, and going back to his father-in-law and his father, all the way back to Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, who in turn was a student of the Maggid of Mizrich, who in turn was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. So we're talking about 9 generations of great mystics, scholars, and yes, singers and composers and great storytellers, and great stories about them. So I felt it may be appropriate not just to share all kinds of random stories, but maybe going in that order, covering as much as I can today, and I'm sure if this is done right, there'll be demand for more, so the stories and songs keep on coming. There's literally thousands of stories and hundreds of songs, beautiful, of all forms and shapes, and I hope I can do justice to give a little taste of it all to you here. And it brings a smile to my face, because it brings me back to my own primal forces that are not, we don't hide behind words and prose and speeches, but it's rather coming from the heart, the stories and the songs that come from the heart. So I'll start with the Baal Shem Tov, who was a mystic, as I said, the founder of the Chassidic movement, and lived 3 centuries ago, a little less, 18th century, 19th century, 18th century I should say, not 19th. He was born in the year, Nachas, Taf Nun Ches, would be Tafration Kuf Nun Shin Nun Ches. 310 years ago, approximately. 320 years ago, I should say. 319 years ago, to be precise. 1798. What? 1798. That would be 1698. 1698, right. Right at the turn of the century, which would be the beginning of the 18th century. Yeah. And he was born in a small town. His early years, we don't know much about him, but we know that he used to spend his time with children, being like what would be the equivalent of a bus driver today. Not even teaching children, but like walking them to school. And when he did that, he would teach them songs, tell them stories, and above all, evoke from them beautiful messages of praising God, giving them, make a blessing on food, thanking God for health. So he was like, he basically imbued in young children that type of connection that would, of course, serve them well. He understood something that many of us don't appreciate fully, especially in our day and age. Something Frederick Douglass said, that it's far easier to bring up a healthy child than to fix a broken adult. And he brought up healthy children. And then at age 36, he became known, and he became a tremendous force that literally changed Jewish history. Here's not the place to go into the Baal Shem Tov story. I'll tell a story about him. I will refer you, however, to a series I did years ago called 5 Mystics, where he, among other mystics that I chose, talked about their stories and their teachings. I'm sorry, their lives and their teachings. So let me share a story with the Baal Shem Tov, and then I'll sing a song of the Baal Shem Tov. And I'll go through, as I said, through the different... So one of my favorites with the Baal Shem Tov stories, 2 stories I'll tell, is first I'll tell a story about a story. And that is also a Baal Shem Tov story. And that is, there was a custom the Baal Shem Tov had that before Rosh Hashanah each year, the new year, he would go to a special location and he would light a fire and he would say a particular prayer for a blessed year, for the Jewish people, for the people of the world. The next generation, the Maggid of Mizrich, his student, it's called Dov Ber of Mizrich, he knew the location, but he didn't know how to light the fire. He knew the location and knew the prayers. So that's what he would do before Rosh Hashanah. His students knew the location, but they forgot the prayers and the fire, how to light the fire, so they just said the prayers. And the question is, what about us? We don't know how to light the fire. We don't know the prayers. We don't even know the location. So what do? We tell the story. That's the power of a story. The power of a story is reliving and re-experiencing something, even if you cannot achieve exactly what was done by the people in that story, but at least you can remember. Which is why we bear witness. Bear witness. Don't say, just because I can't achieve what my great-grandparents or ancestors achieved, tell the story. Tell the story of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Tell the story of people who sacrificed their lives and dedicated their entire lives to virtue and nobility instead of selfishness. So you may not be perfectly there, but when you tell the stories, you're doing the best you can to relive that experience. I think it's a very important message about what stories really convey. And that's why we tell stories. So this was a story in itself that I just said, so I'll share another 2 stories about the Baal Shem Tov. One I've shared many times here, but it's just a very powerful one. I think its lesson is so moving and so relevant. And that's the story with Rabbi Baal Shem Tov and Rabbi Chaim Rappaport. Rabbi Chaim Rappaport was a great sage himself, and the Baal Shem Tov once sent him on a particular mission somewhere. He came back, fulfilled the mission. The Baal Shem Tov insisted on knowing how did he travel to the place he had to go to, which seemed like a trivial detail, but that's what the Baal Shem Tov wanted to know, so he began to share. He said, how I traveled, I went through this town, and then I went through that town. I rested one night, I stayed in a small inn, a krechme. Another night, there was nowhere to stay, so I stayed at the side of a road. I camped out there. In the morning, I woke up. I washed my hands, said my prayers, and then sat down to have something to eat. I needed something to drink, so there was a small little brook, a spring of water. I went over to it, made a blessing, and drank the water. The Baal Shem Tov suddenly, you saw his face lit up. It was just ecstasy. And he said, the water that you just blessed there was waiting from the beginning of time for you to come and make a blessing on that water. Think about this story. I've traveled a lot in my life. I've traveled to places. Now, wherever I come, I always think of this story because I think, who was here before? And why am I here now? Maybe the whole world, the whole universe, not that of selfish, but in a way, humble way. The existence, all time and space is waiting for you to come there and do something good. If people had that type of cognizance and consciousness all the time, we would never be bored. We wouldn't be monotonous. Nothing would be monotonous. We wouldn't need to look for distractions and excitements and highs and all kinds of instant gratification because you have everything right there. Why are you here? And I always say this when I speak. I say, you may have come to hear me speak, or maybe you came to meet somebody. Maybe you have to say something. And so always be ready for the unexpected, the spontaneous. It's a tremendous lesson in life and a very heartwarming lesson as well, that you have something to accomplish, and the reason you got to a certain place, God leads the footsteps of a person, is in order for you, something from the beginning of time is waiting for you to achieve something. That's a tremendous thing. No one but you could achieve that. That's one story. In that same story, there's another sub-story which is not connected to it directly, but similar that he said to Mordechai Tzaddik, was another person, the Baal Shem Tov, another colleague, student of his, and said that a soul comes down to earth to do a favor for another, and spend 70, 80 years, sometimes only for one purpose, to do a favor for another person. It's another Baal Shem Tov statement. So you may have done many good things, but your soul came down in toils and wears and tears through life, 70, 80 years to do a favor for another person. And finally, one more story I'll share with the Baal Shem Tov, which I always find to be very powerful, was when someone came to him, a young widow had lost her husband, and then her sixth child was very sick. And the doctors had given up hope. And she asked the Baal Shem Tov, please pray for my child. Baal Shem Tov had this compassion, so he began to pray. But then he heard a voice from heaven that said, stop praying because the decree has been sealed. This child will not live. The Baal Shem Tov heard that. It only aroused even more commitment. He could not stand seeing this widow suffer so, the mother. So he began praying even stronger. In heaven they said, there will be consequences if you continue to pray. He prayed, and his prayers pierced the heavens, and reversed the decree, and the child lived. And then the voice came and said, because you defied the plan, in other words, you upset the balance by doing this. So yes, the child will live, but as a result, you have to lose your share in the world to come, which is a serious consequence, because it's not just share in this world. It means your eternal life, the soul. It's like we don't believe in eternal damnation, but it's the equivalent of something cut off. What happened? The Baal Shem Tov began to dance and celebrate. And his students said, why are you dancing? You've just lost your share in the world to come. He said, because until now, when I served God for ulterior motives, for this reward, the world to come. Now I know I can serve without any ulterior motive because I'm never going to get the world to come. And that gives me tremendous pleasure. I have no ulterior motive. So some say the end of the story is that when heaven heard that, they said, give him back his world to come. That pleasure we will not let him have. So there you have an interesting approach, to this idea. Which, since I'm already the story, one story leads to the next story. That once again, the Baal Shem Tov was praying for some people, for someone who needed a special prayer, and he gathered 9 tzaddikim, 9 righteous people. And they prayed and prayed to no avail. So then he decided, okay, he needs desperate measures. He goes out into the woods. Baal Shem Tov was, of course, familiar with everybody, including the criminals. And he goes to an area where nobody traveled to, because that's where all the highwaymen would hang out. And suddenly see the Baal Shem Tov here. They say, what are you doing here? So he says, I need 9 of you. I need a minion. I need 10 of you. I need a minion of you. They said, what for what? He says, I need you to take off for a few minutes for your holy work, quote unquote, and to pray for someone. Okay, fine. They do that, and lo and behold, what the righteous people could not accomplish, these criminals were able to accomplish, these thieves. So later they asked the Baal Shem Tov, how is it possible that these criminals were able to achieve something that the great righteous people couldn't achieve? He said, very simple. I saw that all the gates in heaven were locked. I need someone to break in. Okay, so that's how the Baal Shem Tov saw things. With a certain twist. This is a certain Chassidic way of looking at things. Obviously, it's not justifying being a criminal, but it's seeing everything has lessons. And there are places we learn lessons even from criminals, their persistence. And here at Baal, sometimes there's the thing, a holy criminal able to break through the gates in heaven when they're sealed. Now, the Baal Shem Tov had a student, and his student was the Maggid of Mezrich, who would become his successor. And he, I'll share one story about him as well, and then I'll sing a song about from the two of them, including their successor, the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi. So the Maggid, one of the favorite stories is the one where he lived in Mezrich, and he lived a very humble life. He was a tremendous teacher and master. And he was renowned in all the communities. Everyone knew who he was. One day, he receives a visitor who comes to the Mezrich town and says, "Where's the Maggid live? I've heard so much about him. I became a student through his students, and I want to see him." This is a wealthy, very rich and wealthy man, also well known. He never met the Maggid. So people said the Maggid lives at the edge of town in a little shack. So he was pretty surprised. This great Maggid's living in a shack. Okay, fine. He comes over to the shack, knocks on the door. Yes, he walks in, sees the Maggid is sitting there on basically not even like a plank of wood, studying, full of books. There's a bed in the corner. And I mean, the most what would we say, the most, not stark, what's the right word? Humble for sure, but almost like, as minimal as a person can live. And he's so taken aback, he says to the Maggid, "I don't understand. Nowhere does it say in the Torah that you have to live in poverty. Matter of fact, wealth is a blessing. We don't reject wealth. We don't reject comfort. Now, you have to indulge in it. It doesn't have to be the purpose of your life. But why do you have to live like this? You have so many students, myself, others that would support you, would at least live in comfortable." So the Maggid looked to him and said to him, "Tell me, what do you do for a business? What's your business? How do you make your money?" He says, "Well, I go 2-3 times a year to a place called Leipzig, the big market city. I would buy a lot of material, and then I come back and I sell it to the local merchants, and that's how I make my money." He says, "And what does your home look like?" He says, "My home? A palace. I made money. I live like a king." And he described his home with the furnishings and the rooms and the furniture, like relative to then, a very affluent and prosperous home. He says, "And when you travel to the market 2-3 times a year, where do you stay there?" He said, "I stay in a small inn where I do the business, and then I go back home." He says, "And what does your inn look like?" He says, "My inn is, of course, a far more modest room. It's 1-2 rooms with a table, and that's that." He says, "If someone came to visit your inn and said to you, 'You're such a wealthy, powerful person, why are you living in such a..." He'd say, "I'm only on the road. This is not where I am. This is not my home. It's not my domain. My domain is, you want to see what I really look like? Come to my home." The Haim, he said, is God Andish. In my home, it's all completely different. So the Maggid smiled and said to him, "It's exactly the same. I'm also on the road here. I'm in transit. You want to see what what my home looks like? My home is also completely different." Of course, the Maggid was referring to the spiritual home, not a material one. And his home was very rich, which is a tremendous lesson of what we consider to be rich. What do we consider to be affluent? What do we consider to be wealthy? Some people, wealth is very material. The Maggid was telling you, want to see my wealth, you come to my home. This is not my home. This is where I hang out for a short period of time that God wants us to be on this earth. So that's the Maggid story. In that vein, I'll share another story with the Maggid. A similar story where he was once praying in the morning, his prayer services. And he prayed long. He prayed an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes. A visitor who had studied with the Maggid when they were both young students, and they had studied mysticism, Kabbalah together, came for a visit to Mezrich. And after davening, he sees the Maggid's davening and davening. He waits because he wants to greet his old friend. And after he finally finishes, he says to the Maggid, he says, very surprised. We both studied the same Kabbalah. We studied the mystical teachings. We both studied how to pray from our great teachers. My prayer took me an hour. Your prayer is 3-4 hours. How do you explain that? So he said to him, "And what do you do now for a living?" So similar, what many people did then, they went to the marketplace and once a few times a year would buy material and come back and then sell it. He says, "That's what I do." So the Maggid says, "Why do you have to go and bother to travel to these cities? Why don't you just stay home, close your eyes, and meditate about traveling to these places, how you buy the material, meditate, and how you bring it back and how you sell it." So this man says to the Maggid, "Maggid, you're a batlin. Batal means someone who's completely out of touch with reality. I need the schera, I need the material. It's not going to help if I stay home and I meditate on the material that I have to buy. It's not going to get me the material. I'm not going to make the money. So the Maggid said exactly this, right? If you need the schera, the material, you have to travel there. And traveling doesn't take an hour. It can take hours and hours. So you can pray and sit and meditate on things. But if you really want to have the material, you really want to bring the goods home, you have to travel there. So it's also a tremendous lesson in spiritual journeys. Some people want to sit in the comfort of their house. And I'm not no offense to anyone listening now from wherever you may be in your bubble baths or other comfortable places. But if you want the material, sometimes you have to travel. You have to pay the dues. You have to actually go there, and that takes time. You can't just sit and meditate or fantasize about it. Okay, since I'm already on a roll with these stories, I want to share one more story with the Baal Shem Tov that I just always love. Also, it's a prayer story. So I'm going back a little. Okay, it's fine. So the Baal Shem Tov once comes to a synagogue, and he sees a man, after the prayers are over, there's someone sitting and continuing to pray. Everyone went home. And he wonders, why is he praying so long? He goes over closer, and he sees that he's turning all the pages. The prayer book. He's reading the entire prayer book. And he realized that Nebuch, this person probably didn't know how to read or doesn't know the laws of prayer, so he's saying everything. He's saying the prayers of the morning prayers, the afternoon prayers, the evening prayers, what you say on Pesach, what you say on Shavuos, what you say on Sukkot, what you say at a funeral, what you say at a bris, what you say at Bar Mitzvah, at Sheva Brachos. The whole thing. Sfira to Omer. Yeah. So Baal Shem Tov always never judged anybody, on the contrary. The guy finally finished reading the entire prayer book, which was good in the middle afternoon. Baal Shem Tov goes over to him and says, you really pray beautifully, but I think I can teach you to pray even more beautifully. And he takes bookmarks and says, here are the sections that you say in the morning, this is what you stop there, this is what you say in the afternoon. The guy is elated, no one ever showed him. He realizes he can do now the prayers normally and the way it's supposed to be done. Okay, great. Whole new life he has. Doesn't have to spend half a day reading the prayer book. But as Mazel would have it, luck would have it, one day the prayer book slips and falls. And all the bookmarks go flying. And now he loses his place. He doesn't know what to do. Now he thinks the Baal Shem Tov is the only person that really can solve this problem. He sees the Baal Shem Tov had already finished praying, was leaving the shul, the synagogue. So he runs after him because he wants him to reset his bookmarks. Baal Shem Tov is a very brisk and quick walker, and he can't catch up to him. He's walking and walking. He's out of the town already. He's ready, going through the woods. And finally he sees, there's a river up ahead. The Baal Shem Tov, by the river, he's going to have to slow down to find a place to cross. That's when I'll catch up with him. So he's chasing the Baal Shem Tov because he wants to know how to pray again, properly. The Baal Shem Tov comes to the river, doesn't pause at all. He takes out a handkerchief and wipes it and waves it over the river and walks right over the river. This guy, in his enthusiasm, didn't think twice. So he did the same thing. He just copied, he did the same thing. He also crossed the river. Finally, he catches up the Baal Shem Tov somewhere, deep in the woods. He says to Baal Shem Tov says, what are you doing here? He says, I've been running after you for the last hour trying to catch you because my siddur fell down and I need you to reorganize my prayers. The Baal Shem Tov looks at him and says, how did you get here? He says, I followed you. He says, what happened by the river? He says, I did what you did. You waved your handkerchief and I waved my handkerchief. And I walked over the river just like you did. The Baal Shem Tov said, if that's the case, just continue praying as you've always prayed. So this is not advocating illiteracy, but it's saying it's understanding the sincerity of a person. This man was so sincere, appreciating. So yes, it's true. He would unfortunately, like many instances in those days, and even today, some people didn't have the opportunity to study and learn. But you can look at it and laugh at them, dismiss them, turn them into be condescending, or you could say, look at the beauty of a person. You can continue praying just as you prayed. If you can walk over that river with your sincerity, you're doing all right. Now, obviously, the objective is to learn how to pray properly, but it's just the depth of sincerity. So, I'm going to sing a song now. This is called the Song of Three Movements. It's attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, to the Magid, and to the Alter Rebbe, who I will talk about after the song. Each one added a section. So the song is made up of 3 movements. I don't even know if we can call it a song. I'd call it more of a chant. It's called the Nigun of the Gimel Tenuas, 3 movements. Okay. So now we move from story to melody. From words to song. Okay. Goes like this. Diriyaya nanai, diriyaya nanai, diriyaya nanai, ya 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 no, ya no, diriyaya nanai, diriyaya nanai, diriyaya ya 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 ya. Ay 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 yo, ya 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 yo. Oy na na no, oy na 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 no. Driya na na, driya na na, driya na yo no, ay ay no. Driya na na, driya na na, driya na. Oh ya na no na 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 no ay na 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 no ay na na no oy na 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 no diri ya yo ya na na no diri ya no yo diri na na no ay na no ay na no ay na na no ay ay na 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 no ya 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 oy na na no ya 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 yo ay na na no ay na no ay na no ay na na no ay na 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 no ya 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 no ay na na ya no ay ya 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 no ay na na no ay na no ay na no ay na na no ay na 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 no ay 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 no ay na na ya no ay na na no ay na na no ay na no ay na no ay na na no ay na 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 no ya na na no ay na na no ya na 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 ya na na no ay na no ya na no ay na na no ay na 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 no ya na na no ay na na ya no ay na na no ay na na no ay na no ay na no ay na na no ay na 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 no ay 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 na no ay na no ay na na no ay na na no. So this is 3 sections, so these are 3 songs. Now, if you listen closely to the song, maybe you can appreciate the stories even in a more profound way. So that brings me to my next story. The story with the Baal Tanya, Baal Shulchan Aruch. His name is Rab Shneir Zalman of the Yadi. And again, many, many stories, and just sharing ones that come to mind that were particularly touching to me. So as you may know, in 17 Tovkuf Nun Tes would be actually exactly 100 years later, 101 years later, right? 1789, 1799. Right. He was arrested. It's a long story, this whole story, with his arrest for all kinds of false pretenses by enemies of his who felt it was a threat. So they informed on him to the Tsar's government that he is supporting the enemy of the Tsar, which was Turkey at the time. Now Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, controlled Israel, and the Alter Rebbe was sending money to support Jews who had settled in Israel. They had no income. So this was so-called a pretense that he's supporting the enemy of Russia, of Imperial Russia. So there are many stories told about his stay there, where he was 53 days that he was in prison. He was finally freed, but the ministers and the people who held him in custody realized who he was, the great man he was, the great thinker, and a mind like that doesn't come often. So they try to take full advantage of it by speaking to him. So one day a minister comes to see him, a scholar, a philosopher. He was also very familiar with Jewish ideas. And he says, I want to ask the rabbi something. He spoke, I assume, in Russian. He says, when it says in the Bible that after Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, so it says that then God came into the garden and Adam hid from God. And God said, Ayeka, where are you? So my question is, God didn't know where he was? Can someone hide from God? What is God asking, where are you? So the Rabbi Shneur Zalman gave him that conventional answer that Rashi gives. He said, Rashi's answer I know, I want to know your answer. So the way the story goes, one of the versions is he stood up. The Alter Rebbe was a tall and formidable presence. And he looked into the eyes of this minister and said to him, this question that God asked Adam is the question God asks every human being. God has given you these and these amount of years in your life. I think he said 63 years or something like that. Where are you? What have you done with those years? I don't recognize you. What have you accomplished? So the Ayeka is really the question, is not physically he knew where he was, but where do you stand? What have you done with yourself? You've eaten from the tree of knowledge. I don't recognize you. Sometimes, this is my explanation. Sometimes you're sitting with somebody right across the table, and they space out. And you ask, where are you? Of course you know where they are. They're sitting in the chair, but their mind is not with you. Their presence, their personality is not with you. Where are you? Where's your head at? Where's your heart? I don't feel you with me. So God was asking Adam that question, and that's the question asked to everyone. Now this minister happened to be 63 years old, so he fainted. Because the Alter Rebbe said it in such a personal way that it sounded like it was God himself was asking, Ayeka, what have you done with your life? So it's a tremendous way, again, of looking at the life and the expectations. It says that an animal will not attack a human being because it sees the divine image on the human being's face. So the question, of course, is asked, we see animals do attack humans. The answer is because it doesn't recognize the divine face. When Daniel was in the lion's den, the lions left him alone because they saw that he was a man of a higher stature. But if you behave in ways that are not befitting your divine image, so then animals don't see the divine image. It's like cloud. It's like a person whose face is behind a mask or behind some way clouded or masquerading. So that's what the Alter Rebbe was saying, the Ayeka that is asked to each one of us. Ayeka, where are you? Where do you stand? What have you accomplished? Are you living up to your calling, to your purpose, and to your mission? It's one story. Another one that I'll share is, I'm just thinking which one I should go with. Well, it's a Yom Kippur story. It's a very good story as well that's told. I heard it myself many times from the Rebbe, that once Yom Kippur, while in the middle of the prayer service, suddenly the Alter Rebbe leaves the synagogue and no one knows where he's going. And then he comes back a while later. They find out that he went to prepare a fire for a woman at the edge of town who was all alone and was in danger. The Alter Rebbe himself went in the middle of his Yom Kippur services to make sure that she's taken care of. Now the question is asked, why did he himself have to go? He couldn't have sent a student. But this is the sign of a greatness of a leader. Doesn't think in terms of my personal connection with God. If someone's in need, he'll even violate the Yom Kippur and do whatever is necessary to save another person's life and be sensitive as in another story with the Alter Rebbe that he was once studying, and his son, the Reb Dov Ber, which we'll speak about shortly, his son was studying on the other floor, and they lived in the same home. And suddenly he heard the cry of a child that had fallen out of his bassinet, his crib. So the Alter Rebbe went and soothed the child and put him back into his bed. Afterwards, he said to his son, why didn't you hear the cry of this child? And he reprimanded him. He said that how could you be so immersed in your study and so involved and not hear the cry of a child? Again, demonstrating something that is a sorely important, sorely lacking message often, that people are so consumed with their own religiosity and with their own devotion. And the Mittler Rebbe was no small person. And yet, even that, the fact that he's so immersed but cannot tell, you'd think is a quality. He's so absorbed in his learning, he can't hear anything. But not the cry of a child. Don't hear the phone ring, that's not a problem. Don't hear your smartphone buzzing, that's not an issue. But the cry of a child, a human being, that's a sign that there's something missing. So that's a few stories of the Alter Rebbe. I have many more, but I want to continue with this process here. So I'm going to do is sing a song of the Alter Rebbe. You have to remember the Alter Rebbe was also the composer of 10 songs himself. I'll sing one of them. And he was, of course, a great writer and a composer of books, of course, the Tanya, the classic. And he also wrote a Shulchan Aruch, a code of Jewish law. So we're talking about a scholar of the highest order it's hard to even describe the extent. But again, I'm not focusing on his teachings, I'm focusing more on some stories that capture sometimes a part of a person that you don't always see directly in a teaching. So one of the songs is a very well-known song. It's a song on a verse in the Psalms. And we say it every Rosh Chodesh and on holidays with Hallel. And it goes like this. Keili ata v'yoydeko Eloi kayarei memeko Keili ata v'yoydeko Eloi kayarei memeko Keili Ata v'yoydeko Eloi kai arai memeko Keili ato 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 v'yoydeko Eloi kai arai memeko. So now let's move to the next Rebbe. His name is Reb Dov Ber, the oldest son of Reb Shneir Zalman, and he's called the Mittler Rebbe. And he is a beautiful story, which is you can even use it in the context of therapy. It's a great story about what it means to be a sensitive, called bedside manner, if you wish. So the custom by these great masters and mystics and teachers, that their disciples, their followers, their students would from time to time come visit them and go in what was called yechidus, private audience, and would ask and open their hearts and ask for advice and for ways to heal in different challenges that they may have had and face different issues. So it was once at the end of the holiday season where there were many people waiting to go see the Rebbe. They were like on a line. And everything was rolling along when suddenly the Rebbe told the secretary he's going to take a break now, which was really not common for him to do that. It was not like him because there are people waiting and they're waiting to travel back home. But hey, the Rebbe needs some fine. So he took a break. Was it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour passed, a few hours passed. And his assistant was so curious, and he's listening in, and he's hearing how the Rebbe is crying. You could hear that he's like going through something very personal inside the room. He didn't know what. Finally, time passed, and I don't know how much time, but finally the Rebbe opened his door and resumed what was called the Yechidas, these private audiences. After finishing it, after a few days later, the assistant asked the Rebbe, said, Rebbe, maybe the Rebbe can explain to me what happened. It's unlike the Rebbe to make people wait. So what was going on? The Rebbe could share. So the Mittler Rebbe said to him the following words. Listen to this. So when someone comes to me for advice, or they have a problem or a struggle they're dealing with, I can't just give them advice. I have to find that same problem within me in some subtle form. And once I find it within myself, I can correct it within me, and then I can give them advice. There was a person who came to see me, and he shared something with me which was so off the charts, so to speak, out of the pale. I couldn't find, for the life of me, as much as I dug in introspection, I couldn't find anything similar in my own being that would allow me. Now, why would God put me in this place to hear this, and how could I advise him if I can't find it within myself? So I needed to take time to search and search and search, and I did. And then I finally found something I did. Obviously nothing similar, but on a very small, subtle form that I could then repair within myself, and that allowed me to give him advice. Think about this story. We have many doctors and therapists and psychiatrists. They give maybe good advice. Some don't give such good advice. But even if they do, it's a whole other story, finding it within yourself. As a matter of fact, I know there's the concept of transference and countertransference and all that, but much of therapy is based on being detached and not over-identifying. Being able to find inside yourself is that type of commitment, that your problem is my problem, and my problem is your problem, that there's that type of connection, I find that to be mind-blowing in the empathy, the capacity that you can't really advise someone unless you identify with the issue. You could say, 1 second, that's this person's problem. They're coming to me because I don't have the problem and I'm objective. But still, with all that, being able to find within yourself that which the other person is dealing and suffering with, that's someone you can trust because they empathize, they relate to you. That was the story of the Mittler Rebbe that I wanted to share. There are other stories as well. I'm going to sing his song, but I wanted to think of another story I wanted to share. The Mittler Rebbe. Well, if it comes to me, I'll share it. His song goes like this. oh yanai diridai ararara ya 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 yo ay na na no diri ya 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 yo ananom ananom ayanai oh yanai no ya 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 yo Diddy-dai, 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 ay, ay, da-dai, ay, ayanai, ayananai, diddy-dai, diddy-dai, diddy-doi, ay, ay, da-dai, ay, da-dai, diddy-oi, diddy-dai, 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 ay, 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 did it I, did it I, did it I, ay, that I, not oh, ay, na, 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 ay, did it I, na, 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 no, ay, did it I, ay, na, 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 ay did it ay ay na 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 no ay no ay na 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 ay did it ay oh na 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 no ay did it ay oh na 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 no ay did it ay na 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 no ananum did ay na oh na no na ay you ananum did ay oh na no na nanum did it I, did it I, did it I, did it I, did I did it I, did it I, did it I, did it I, did I, oh no, did I, did it I, did it I, did it I, did I, did it I, did it I, did it I, did it I, did I, ay na no, ay na 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 no, ay did it ay na 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 no, ay did it ay na 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 no, ay did it ay na 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 no, ananum did ay oh no did ya yo ayanum did ya oh no did ya na okay, how are we doing? Putting you all to sleep. That's what good songs do. Well, listen, like they say, some dance to remember, some dance to forget. Some songs help you wake you up, and some songs put you to sleep. I guess everybody what they need. So the next Rebbe was going to be the Tzemach Tzedek, who was a son-in-law of this Rebbe that I just referred to. Rabbi Nachum Mendel is his name, and I will share this story. It's a very interesting story about independence and autonomy. So the Tzemach Tzedek was, again, a tremendous scholar, mystic of the highest order. And at the time, as all these rabbis and teachers and leaders would go often to Petersburg, which was the capital, where the czars would reside in those days, to advocate on behalf of the Jewish people, make life a little easier. Once he wasn't able to go to Petersburg for whatever reason, so he called in one of his prized students, Aden Belinitzer was his name, And he said, Rabban, I want you to go on my behalf. You'll be my ambassador, my emissary, to deal with the issues that have to be dealt with. And our Rabban was a sophisticated man, an intelligent person. Rabban says to the Rebbe, what do I do when if I have a doubt? If I'm not sure what I should do. Those days there were no emails, there were no faxes, there were no phones. So what do I do? So the Rebbe said to him, Tzemach Tzedek said to him, you'll build boyin al das atzmei, which means you'll determine on your own, with your own mind, you'll figure out what to do. The Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek's youngest son, was there in the room when he was sending him. And when he heard those words that he said, that he'll build on his own opinion, his own thoughts, so the Rebbe right away said, the Rebbe Marash, his son, thought to himself, he didn't say anything, of course, he thought to himself, there's something wrong. Man, the guy has too much of his own opinion. It didn't rub him right. That he should be completely dedicated to what the Rebbe has to say, not his own das atzmei, meaning his own independent, autonomous ideas. But he kept it to himself, and that was that. Rabban traveled to Petersburg. They stayed in the town called Lubavitch, where they lived. Once they were sitting at a meal, and suddenly the Tzemach Tzedek, you see, was suddenly in a trance. And he said, Rabbi Aaron matet sich in Petersburg. He sensed that Rabbi Aaron was struggling with an issue in Petersburg, what to do. Something came up, he didn't know what to do. A few minutes passed, and the Tzemach Tzedek smiled and said, he resolved the issue, good. And he did he did what I would have done. So then the Rebbe Marash realized, the son, Reb Shmuel, his name was, Rebbe Marash later became Rebbe Marash, he said, then he appreciated in his own, he realized that on the contrary, had the Tzemach Tzedek sent a puppet, a clone, that has no opinions, is not an intelligent person, and does not have any autonomy, well, what's the achievement? Sending a puppet is a puppet. But he sent a man that had his own stature and had his own intelligence and his own ideas. And still, he knew how to align his ideas to the one who sent him. That for him he realized, was even greater. So it's again a tremendous lesson, and especially when you study Chabad Chassidic thought. Some people think the idea is to find a crutch, a teacher, a mentor, a Rebbe, someone, even God. No, there's no such thing as a crutch. We're all created with independent autonomy, with minds and hearts, and we're expected to use them. But the beauty is here that there's a risk involved, because when you start going with your own mind, you can come up with who knows what. Look what people come up with when they're left at their own accord. But the beauty is that that's exactly what God said. I'll give you free will, and I trust that you'll use it well. But it's still up to us. So the key here is not to just be to lose your independence and to just be brainwashed and programmed to follow whatever another person says. It's to be yourself, be an individual. But make sure your individuality is aligned with humility to the right cause. That's the achievement. So someone who doesn't have individuality is just a child, is just like I said, a puppet, a machine. What's the achievement? Nothing was accomplished. But someone who's an independent entity and still aligns their mind to do the right thing, to what their teacher, what their mentor expects, that is great achievement. So that's a Tzemach Tzedek story. One among, again, many, many, many. I'm choosing really select. There are literally hundreds of stories. There are entire hundreds, if not thousands of stories involved. I'm just choosing those that come to mind that I think have personal lessons that are also trying to make them somewhat heartwarming as well. So let's do a Tzemach Tzedek song, right? Just in case you're missing a song. Tell me if it's like a lullaby as well. Okay. So Tzemach Tzedek song, the classic one we sing is the one called like this. Yemin Hashem Rayimeimu Yemin Hashem Oisechoyil Yemin Hashem Rayimeimu Yemin Hashem Oisechoyil Deri yoy na roy na roy na roy na roy na roy na roy oy na roy na roy na roy na roy ay na roy na roy na roy ay Ayanarai, ay, 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 yo. Oh, yana, ay, ay, naroi. Ayanaroi, ay, 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 yo. Ayana, ay, 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 no, ayamin Hashem. Roim, ayamo, yamin Hashem. Moisecho yil, yamin Hashem. Roim, ayamo, yamin Hashem. Moisecho yil. Ayanarai, 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 oyanarai, ayanarai, oyanarai, oyanarai, ayanarai, ayanai, ayanarai, ayanarai, ayanarai. Oy ay 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 naro ay naro ay 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 no oy no ay naro. Okay, and that woke you up, right? So we'll do one more, and then we'll do another part 2 in the coming weeks. I'll do finally the Rebbe Marash. The next Rebbe was the Rebbe Marash of Shmuel. And here's a short story that was a very pointed story that I was going to share. Someone once came to him and said, Rabbi, I have a friend who did something really terrible, but he's ashamed to come to you, so he sent me. What could he do to repair, to correct his ways? So the Rebbe Marash said to him, wisely, he said to him, why did he have to expose himself to you and share what he did that was so humiliating? He could have come to me and say, I have a friend. You understand? You get the thought. This is the Rebbe Marash's sharp wit. But I won't suffice with that story. I'll share another one or two. Rebbe Marash was also very discreet. He had 7 brothers. He was one of 7 brothers. And actually one of 6 brothers. And all the brothers were known to be great scholars, and he was very discreet. He was a businessman once, but in truth he was a greater scholar than all of them. He ended up becoming the next Rebbe, actually. But in public, he behaved in ways that was more, he was dressed more modern, and people didn't realize who he was. Once his father, the Chassidic, said a discourse, a Chassidic discourse, a very profound one, where he analyzed a piece in Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim is a classic work from the works of the Arizal, written by Reb Chaim Vital. And the students were all, the Chassidim were all perplexed because they didn't understand the discourse. So they asked the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, go ask my son, Reb Shmuel. That's one version of it. I think another version is that someone decided to go ask him. So he comes to the Reb Shmuel's house, and he looks in the window. He sees that he's sitting with the Eitz. He's standing at a big Eitz Chaim on the table, and he's delving into it, and he sees he's struggling with it. He knocks on the door. He thought, great, that if he's struggling with it, he'll be able to help. He's really involved in it. He comes in, and no more Eitz Chaim. There's a big newspaper on the table, the Eitz Chaim underneath it, or he moved it away, whatever. He says to the Rebbe Marat, the Reb Shmuel, he says, the mimer that your father said today, can you help me understand? He says, why are you coming to me? Go to my brothers. He says, what do I know? He says, listen, I know what's lying there, the Eitz Chaim, and if you don't tell me, I'll tell everyone that you were sitting and learning this Eitz Chaim. So if you wanted to keep the secret, you have to tell me what's going on. So fine, he made a deal with him, and he explained to him what is the whole idea, and that was kept secret. They spent all nights discussing it. While they were discussing it, the Rebbe Marash came and poured him cups of tea. Okay, fine. A few days passed, and the Rebbe Marash says, so you remember what we studied together? Yes. He says, and you remember how many cups of tea? He said, no. He said, you had 24 cups of tea that night. So for him, this was the main thing, that not only was he discreet and knew of his strength, not only was he such a great scholar, but he even remembered what kind of cups of tea. Usually when you're involved in something scholarly, you don't remember exactly how many cups of tea you drank. And that we remember, that type of grounding that he had, Rebbe Marash. So the Rebbe Marash was a very interesting personality in that sense, many paradoxes. And with that, we'll sing and conclude with this song from the Rebbe Marash. And as I said, there'll be a part 2. We'll take it to the next, simply because of the time limits. And we have to see what the ratings are for this. If the ratings are good, then we'll do another part. This is a pilot. We'll see. Maybe we'll start a new series, song and stories. That could be pretty good. So Rebbe Marash's nigun is called sometimes the Chatchila River, Ein Zwei Drei Vier. It goes like this. Oh ya na 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 ya na na ya no ya 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 no ya da ya na 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 ya na na ya no ya 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 no da ya na 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 ya ya na 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 ya ay na 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 no ay na 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 no ya 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 no ay na 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 no ay ay oh ya na ya oh ya na na ya ay na 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 ya ay na na ya oh ya na na ya no ya na na ya oh ya na ya na ya na ya na na ya ya na ya no ya na na ya na ay ya do yo ya ya na no ya ya no no ya ya no no ya Diriya ya na no. Diriya ya no. Ana ya no. Diriya ya yo. Ayayo. Diriya ya. Diriya ya no. Oh ya na diriya. Ay na ya na oy na no. So this we conclude this part. It's definitely not finished because I haven't even sung or told stories about my own Rebbe that I personally experienced. Obviously, have first-hand experience, and his father-in-law and his father. So we have 3 in this chain of these 9. I did 6 out of the 9. And there'll be 3 more coming, and I hope I did a little justice and did somewhat of a taste, an appetizer of the warmth, the soul, the passion, the whole full range and spectrum of life experiences, both in these songs and the stories. You can tell both the sadness and the joys, but above all the transcendence, that no matter what we do in life, we're able to transcend and not be shaped and defined by our experiences, but rather we shape and define them. And I think when you are empowered with an arsenal of this literature, this scholarship, the ideas, and coupled with the stories, and tripled with the songs, you really have a formidable force to really empower and deal with any challenge that comes our way. Should all be blessed to use these tools. It's all recorded, so you can always watch it again and again. So there's replays and reruns. I think the Facebook, you could also watch it. It's all once it's out there, it's out there. As we know, once it's recorded, may my recordings and things that I say only be good things. So they'll never come back to haunt me. On the contrary, to serve as a merit. And again, dedicated by Judy Kirk in honor of the birthdays. Yafa Rezel Bas Tova, David Bas Sheva Bas Yehudet Perel, Yisrael Nissen Ben Yom Ben Yehudet Perel, in memory of Beinish Getzel Ben David Eliyahu, Kalman Mordechai Ben David Eliyahu, David Eliyahu Ben Avram Yitzchak, and the outside of your mother. And we should only have good news, joyous news, and always sing, and may all our lives be like a narrative, beautiful stories, and beautiful songs. Thank you very much.